Hi everyone, it's Nichol Spohr here with another video. Today I'm sharing a couple of layered stencil backgrounds, one layer cards with the Simon Says stamp, STAMPtember, Concord 9th, limited edition exclusive stamp set Monster Hugs. One layer cards are one of my favorites because they're so easy to mail. We're going to start with a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock trimmed to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. This is a really easy stamp set to build. It has this adorable monster, and then you can choose one of 2 arms for the second arm there, and then you can choose whether you want him to hold a sign or the balloon or just to wave. I'm going to create 2 backgrounds at once while I have the stamp in my MISTI, plus I'm going to stamp masks for each area. So I created a mask for the monster. I'm stamping the arm, and I'm going to stamp the same arm for both so that it appears he's holding a sign for one and a balloon, the large balloon, for the second. And then I'm going to create a mask for the hand as well, making sure to clean my stamps really well in between each. Then I'm going to stamp him holding the pole for the sign, and again create the mask. Then for the second card, I'm going to stamp the string instead of the sign. I found the string kind of hard to use in the MISTI. It kept trying to roll over, so I ended up using an acrylic block, and it was just as easy to use that as it is using a MISTI. This way I was sure to get it lined up perfectly. I'm using VersaFine ONYX black ink to stamp my images. This is my favorite ink to use when coloring with Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. Let's grab the balloon, the large balloon here. You could also create a balloon from that solid heart image if you wanted to. I'm going to stamp the large balloon, create a mask for that as well. And then I need to trim out all of my masks. We'll stamp the sign for the second card, and we'll create a mask for this too. I'm going to cut out each area, place the masks right over these stamped images. We're going to reuse the masks for the monster and the arm. We need additional masks for the sign pole, the sign, and the balloon. So for the first card, I'm going to be using the sign pole and the sign. Both have masks on them. This masking paper is from Simon Says Stamp, and it's my very favorite. It's really easy to place over the images, plus you can lift it up very easily when you're done. For the layered stenciled background, this is a great, easy way to create a visually interesting background that's one layer. I'm going to do something a little different rather than a normal blue sky, and we're going to do a pink sky on one and a yellow sky on the other. I'm creating some cloud borders with the Simon Says Stamp Clouds for Days stencil. And I'm going to work my way up the panel using Spun Sugar Distress ink. You could also use Distress Oxide ink. Either one is going to work really great for this technique. I find that Distress ink blends so beautifully on the Bristol Smooth cardstock. This is my preferred cardstock for ink blending and Zig Clean Color Real Brush marker coloring. We're going to work our way all the way up the panel. And then in order to get that fun layered effect of the falling hearts from the sky, I'm mixing and matching stencils from 3 different manufacturers. This Clouds for Days stencil is from Simon Says Stamp, and over this we're going to layer the Fall Showers Heart stencil using Picked Raspberry Distress Oxide or Distress ink. I'm going to hold it in place and kind of pounce the color on through the stencil, concentrating the darker ink up at the top and just trying to lighten it a little bit down towards the bottom. I'm not being super precise with this. I just want the illusion of those falling hearts from the sky. Next, we're going to add a little bit of a grassy border using a My Favorite Things Grassy Edges stencil. And we're going to just stencil a couple of borders here. It really ends up kind of appearing to be one. If you want it to be two separate ones, I would recommend using another color of ink for a really defined second border edge. Maybe in Mode Lawn Distress ink, that would look really great. This is going to give that nice landscape illusion and ground the image so the little monster here from the Concord 9th Monster Hug stamp set doesn't appear to be floating out in outer space. This is also a technique you could do with any stamp set you have. It doesn't necessarily have to be just this Monster Hugs stamp set. This is one of my favorite ways to create a really visually interesting background scene. The grass was created with Twisted Citron Distress ink. Now that we have our background colored in with Distress ink and stencils, we can remove the masks. My favorite way to do this is to take a pair of tweezers and pull the masks off. This keeps your fingers out of the ink of the background, plus removes the stencils without tearing them. That way they can be reused. I'm coloring in my monster with some Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. This monster is colored with a combination of turquoise green and green shadow. I'm going around the edges with the darker of the two colors, which is the turquoise green, kind of layering that into the fur shape of the monster. I forgot to mention when I was creating the mask for this monster, it can appear to be kind of a hard image to create a mask for with all of the texture around the edges. I did not worry about trimming out all of those little sections. I kind of just cut around the basic shape and masked that off. The great thing about Distress ink and the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers is they're both water-based, so any little pink ink that might have seeped around the edges of the monster, I can simply color over that with my Zigs and cover up any of that ink. So I didn't create a perfect mask. Instead, I just kind of created more the general shape, which masked it well enough. We blended out with the lighter color, which is the green shadow. For the sign pole, I'm using brown and light brown. Again, laying the dark color down first and blending out with the lighter color. I have a piece of scrap paper here that I use to clean the tip of my lighter marker quite often. And then I'm going to draw in some grass. This just helps ground that monster even more. We're going to do 3 little tufts of grass down here. And I'm even going to draw in like a little shadow around near his feet and blend out with my light green, yellow-green marker. For his horns and his belly, I'm using blue and English lavender. Lots of really fun bright color for this card. Again, laying down the blue color and then blending with English lavender. You'll get a completely different look depending on what color you blend out the blue with. On the second card, I'm going to use light blue to blend out the blue color. For the sign, I'm coloring this in with peach pink and sugared almond pink, coming in dark from each side, and then I'm going to blend out with my lighter color towards the center of the sign. This is going to give a really nice effect, kind of a little highlight area towards the middle of the signage. Once the ink is completely dry, and I would recommend hitting it with a heat tool if you're going to do this right away, or letting it dry for a little bit if you're allowing it to air dry, I'm going to take greetings from the Monster Hug stamp set, line them up in my Misty, and before I stamp them, I did go through and add some little white dots to the monster with an opaque white pen, giving him some fun detail and just extra finishing touch there. We'll also take a black glaze pen to the eyes, and we're going to use the white pen on his teeth so that they really stand out. Hitting this whole thing with my heat tool, as I mentioned, I was afraid that the embossing powder I'm going to use for the sign will stick to other parts of this, so I'm just going to make sure it's really good and dry. put it back in my MISTI, use the powder tool over the sign, and then stamp my greetings, "You're pretty great, way to go," right there in the middle of the sign. I love that there's tons and tons of greetings in this stamp set, so you can create all kinds of cards with this cute monster, balloon, and sign. I'm going to ink these up with clear embossing ink and then heat emboss this with white embossing powder. The white really shows up great in the middle of the sign. You could also use black if you don't want to maybe emboss. You could just use your VersaFine ONYX black ink to stamp a greeting as well. I like how the white looks against this dark pink. And on the balloon card, the second card we're going to create, it looks really great on that orangish yellow balloon as well. If any embossing powder gets where you don't want it, I like to take a paintbrush and just wipe that away. We're going to heat set this with our embossing tool. And now it's time to just add our finishing touches. Here's that black glaze pen for the eyes. I've got some honeybee stamps, candy hearts in light pink and white that I'm going to place on either side of that second line of text on the sign. I've got my card base here. My panel is slightly smaller, so it's going to kind of instantly frame up this one layer card. These little hearts are the perfect size to adorn the signage, plus they match the theme of the card really nicely. I couldn't decide if I wanted to scatter them or put them all on the sign. I decided to put all of these on the sign, and then in the sky we're going to take some pretty pink posh, small iridescent heart confetti, and we'll scatter those throughout for a little bit of sparkle and shine that doesn't take away from the rest of the card. This is one of my favorite things to do if I'm looking for a little embellishment, but I don't want it to overpower the whole card. I'm using a jewel picker and a little Ranger multi-matte medium to attach these. The jewel picker allows you to easily pick up those little confetti pieces and put them wherever you want them to go on the card without having to use your fingers and get them in the glue. Once I have all of those little heart confetti pieces in place, my card is all finished, and I'm ready to move on to the second design. I loved the sign and I loved the balloon, so I wanted to create a card with each because I think it's really fun and really versatile and just such a cute little monster. The balloon is great for lots of different occasions, but I decided to create a birthday card because it's always great to have those on hand. We're going to do a different color background for this card just to mix it up and show you how easy it is to use the same stencils and just switch up the color for a completely different look. We're going to use the Clouds for Days stencil again to ink up the background, this time with squeezed lemonade distress ink. And we're going to work our way all the way up the panel. I think that this doesn't show up quite as well in the finished video as Clouds or in the finished card just because of the light color, but it does provide some nice texture to the background before we layer over the top of this with carved pumpkin distress ink and that Honeybee Stamps Fall Showers Falling Hearts stencil. I like to use a little piece of masking tape because this Clouds for Days stencil also has cloud cutouts in the center. I don't want to accidentally stencil those parts onto my card, so I usually use a large piece of Post-it tape to help mask that area off as well. We're reusing the stencil from the first, or the mask rather, from the first card. You can see down there at the bottom the monster and the monster's hand. Now we're going to just pounce on and blend on that carved pumpkin distress ink with the Falling Hearts Fall Showers stencil. I love the orange over the yellow. It gives a completely different effect. It's really bright and fun. And I think this card could work for a boy or a girl with the color scheme we have. Again, we're going to create some grass along the bottom edge of the card with the My Favorite Things Grassy Edges stencil and Twisted Citron Distress ink. I did create a couple borders, but I think that this one wasn't quite as effective, and so I'm going to blend that out after a bit because I think it looks a little funny and doesn't give as natural of a of an effect. And so when I color in the line underneath the monster's feet with my zig markers, I can fix that a little bit. Again, I'm going to use my tweezers to remove these masks. They're still plenty sticky. If you want to create additional cards, you definitely could. I think that it needs a little more yellow ink down near the grassy border, so I just took my ink blending tool without adding any additional ink and added a little bit more color. We're going to use the bright yellow and yellow Zig Clean Color Real Brush Marker pens to color in the balloon. I like to go kind of in a circle shape around the balloon and pull that color out towards the middle, lightening as I go, which gives a natural highlight effect. I'm going to kind of go over this a couple times till I get it blended the way I want. And then for this monster, we're going to use a combination of blue and light blue zig markers. You might remember on the first card we used blue and English lavender for the horns and the tummy of the monster. This time you get a completely different look when you combine the blue with light blue. It's more blue than purple. When you combine it with the English lavender, you get a little bit more of that purple effect. We're going to go more tone on tone with this monster as well for the tummy part, and we're going to use light blue and haze blue, and then we'll color in his horns with the brown and light brown colors instead of doing matching. I wanted the horns to stand out just a little bit more, and I thought with the light blue color that they wouldn't. When I hold the cards side by side at the end of the video, you can see the difference between the two colors really well. Again, drawing in some grass, blending that out with my yellow green. I even went back with my Distress ink and inking tool and blended that out a little bit more. I'm going to lay down the light blue color around the tummy, blend out with haze blue, and then those horns with brown and light brown as I mentioned a second ago. Black gel pen for the eyes, and just like the last monster, we're going to add some little dot detail all over to add some fun interest. This is a white opaque pen, just adding dots to some of the darker areas of the monster so they really show up. I'll also go over the teeth just in case any of the marker got into that area so that they appear nice and white. All over the sky background, I ended up using the Yay greeting from the Monster Hug stamp set, stamped with that carved pumpkin distress ink, using first and second generation stamping. This adds another layer of interest and fun to that background, something a little different than what we did for the first card. You could even maybe add the love you greeting or something to the first card if you like this look. I'm going to take the happy birthday sending hugs messages from the Monster Hug stamp set, stamp those on the balloon with clear embossing ink, sprinkle on white embossing powder, and then heat set that with my heat tool before finishing the card again with some of those honeybee stamps, candy hearts, this time in white. We'll do a trio of those underneath the stamped and embossed greetings. And again, we're going to add a scattering of the small iridescent mini heart confetti from Pretty Pink Posh all over the sky to match the hearts in the sky and give that little bit of sparkle. When you hold the cards at an angle, you really see that nice iridescent sheen. This stamp set also has a coordinating die if you're interested in that. This is a limited edition exclusive stamp set to Simon Says Stamp for STAMPtember, designed by Concord 9th. This is a stamp and die set that once it's gone, so if you like it, please be sure to grab it up soon. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for these layered stencil background scene cards featuring the Monster Hugs STAMPtember stamp set from Concord 9th for Simon Says Stamp. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more cards featuring exclusive limited edition STAMPtember stamp sets from Simon Says Stamp that you might be interested in. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.